Hello there, welcome to the Headhunter Show with me, Laban, coming to you from Kofisi, right here in 9 West, our partners in this Headhunter series. Always a pleasure to have you on board, and thank you for the feedback that we continue to receive on our social media platforms as well. And speaking about social media and technology, we're talking about advancement in technology, particularly in the HR circles. Here we're looking at new ways of hiring, new ways of recruitment as well, performance management and what have you, all on social media, and also looking at the tools that are used actually on this. We'll be speaking to a technological expert, that's none other than Moses Kemibaro, who's the CEO and co-founder at Dotsavvy East Africa, just talking to us about the landscape and how it is out there and ensuring you can actually get ahead to get headhunted. And something I actually got from you is that digital currency. What's your digital currency? It's pretty interesting because, it's really how you are out there that, people will look at and make sure you get hired. And speaking of which, so then how should your LinkedIn profile be, which is, of course, widely acclaimed for the opportunity for people to actually get hired on. LinkedIn profile, I can actually talk about Twitter. What are you posting, retweeting, what are you liking? Your WhatsApp picture, will you as an employer maybe look at what your future hires WhatsApp is like and make a decision out of that? So let's talk about that really to get potential, employees to really get ahead on their digital currency.
Yeah, I think how you build your personal brand on digital platforms has become a game changer, right? And I think a lot of talent is getting, sort of found and surfaced as a result of their presence on social media platforms, in particular LinkedIn, which I always like to think of as Facebook with a suit and tie, Yeah. So people are increasingly using your digital profile stroke personal brand to make recruitment decisions. And why this has become a key driver around recruitment in HR is that the modern person, when they're looking for a job, will first of all do a research on you as a company and look at your digital platforms to determine, are you the right company for me to work with? And we many a times have employees in meetings, and usually we'll ask them at the end of the interview, potential employees at the end of the interviews, any questions? Yeah, oh, hang on, how come you're not updating your Instagram? And you're like, okay, we kind of do the public holidays or whatever.
Yeah.
We're busy working on our clients' platform, so therefore we don't. But for them, it's a serious issue when they're gauging you as an employer. But here's the other inverted side to that. When they are essentially applying for jobs and want to be seen as the right candidate, the HR resource or the recruiter is going to go online and check you out.
Yeah.
What have you been saying on, Facebook,
Twitter?
What were you doing on your sherehe when you were on Instagram in Naivasha or Nax Vegas?
Yes.
So your digital profile becomes also part of your personal brand in terms of how you're measured and weighed as being a potential candidate. Now, I personally, over the years, have been very surprised, somewhat pleasantly, that a lot of the stuff I do, which is thought leadership on my LinkedIn profile, on my blogging, where I'm very passionate about all things digital and technology. So I'll write an article about something that happened like last week, where the Safaricom 5G launch, I was a panelist there.
Yeah.
I made sure my YouTube channel had that particular segment of that day. I wrote about it. I took some short videos. So suddenly, if you go to Google,
also had you on their YouTube platform as well. So
and how did Safaricom find out about me? It's because I built this digital brand or persona that people know speaks about these things. I became the candidate of choice because of what they see I do online on Twitter and so forth.
Yeah.
And I think what I would encourage, both young and older people today looking to be headhunted or looking to be recruited, that the average recruiter, whether it's from a professional firm or within the organization that's actually recruiting, is going to check you out. And the question is, what are they going to find? Is it going to be what you were doing in Lamu?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be the fact that you were a panelist on a session, or that maybe you have an excerpt of something you presented at a Rotary Club, maybe you wrote a white paper, maybe you're a member of a professional association where you've had the privilege to create some content for their publications that you then put on your profiles. And I think never before has it been more important, especially in the pandemic where face-to-face became an issue. People start looking at your digital persona and your platforms as a measure of who you are. So never before is it more important as a personal brand to actually build out your digital profile. And I would say that today, the easiest places to make momentum grow is probably on TikTok, because that's where a lot of the young people are, but also even the large organizations are looking to see what you're saying on TikTok, and you don't have to dance all the time. People do pictures, videos where you talk about 5 tips or points you should have about something.
You know what's interesting about that is actually that even as a media company, we've had to actually alter how you're actually breaking news, how you're actually sharing information.
In short form, yes.
In a very short, precise.
Exactly.
You know, and you actually mentioned as well, we are actually competing for attention. You know, you have all, you know, your phone, you have your book, you have a lot of things that you're juggling at the same time. So then how do you make sure that it's actually short, precise,
exactly,
and to the point, you know?
And I've done the research. It starts always with the younger people.
Yeah.
You know, I remember back in the day, you know, corporates would tell us we'll never be on Facebook.
Yes.
And today they're the culprits who are there in the biggest form.
Yeah.
Now the big thing is short form content, especially driven by TikTok. So concise, compelling, interesting. On LinkedIn, are you publishing stuff regularly? You know, do you have articles you're putting out there around a theme or an issue within the market or industry you're involved in? And the more and more you do this, you find that these platforms will reward you with visibility. They'll reward you with people making inquiries, will reward you with people inviting you to be on panels and events. But I think right now the call to action is very clear. You as an individual in the workplace, trying to make sure that you can be top of mind by the stuff you're putting out online that speaks to your profession or your area of passion or interest.
Yeah. So then just maybe quick tips, you know, how should that LinkedIn profile look like? How should that Twitter page look like? Just for that person who's maybe, you know, the excuse I feel I got the other day was, no, maybe they're too busy to actually update. Like for instance, you know, large organizations and senior executives who, you know, they need to actually maybe tweet and share online, but they don't want to do that. But at the same time, then the company suffers that lack of a presence online, for instance.
Yeah, for sure. What's happening is corporate leaders are now becoming extensions of the corporate brand.
Yeah.
Right. So when you think about, you know, Peter Ndegwa, you think Safaricom.
Yeah.
When you know, think about KCB, you know, you always think about Joshua. There's that affiliation or connection between the brands.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing, and this is something that we've also been doing with some of our clients, is that where the corporate leadership is concerned, because they're busy guys, I have this theory that those who have the knowledge or the insight or the thought leadership rarely have the time to document it.
Yeah.
And what I often say is that in those scenarios, then the best way to get these people is to put them in a room. If you can, make them comfortable and put a microphone on and tell them, speak your mind on these 3, 4, 5 topics. And if they're able to unpack that information for you, then what you can do is you can then transcribe it into blog posts, into short snippets and nuggets that you can call infographics and so forth. But the idea is that the guys who have the best knowledge often don't have the time to unpack it for you.
Yeah.
So we can say that we can then people who can create a team around you that can act as translators of those insights and so forth, which allow you to then publish the content. If you don't have time to write, there are wonderful tools like otter.ai. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but Otter, literally you speak into your phone or into your computer and it will basically transcribe exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
You can then cut and paste, edit that content, and you have a blog post in less than 5 minutes of speaking. You know, so there are these hacks and things that you can do to sort of cut the time and
the time you're driving, you're saying, "Oh, wait a minute! I feel like I need to post something on Facebook."
Yeah.
And you get home, of course, family takes over as well.
Yeah.
So that's actually an interesting tool to have, so that, you know,
podcasting
and combining the app to the audio visual way
to the
of
text,
consumption,
the translation, the transcription. Then you have tools like Anchor. Anchor is owned by Spotify.
Yeah.
That's what I use for my my podcasting.
Podcast, yeah.
And again, there's a mobile app for it. You open the account, it connects to Apple Podcasts and all.
Yeah.
And a podcast can be you musing over the fact that something interesting has happened in your industry. Podcasting today is incredibly popular in terms of the growth, especially with younger audiences who don't have the time to watch necessarily a video. Don't have the time to read
300-page book, for instance.
But they can listen to you when they're in the gym on a jog, right? So
Yeah.
if you're creating content for audiences in different places based on their behavior, then you can be visible. But also if you don't have the time, then find the hacks and the tools that allow you to do it. It doesn't have to be complicated. There's some people on TikTok who are the most popular TikTokers. They don't dance, but they put their phone on a tripod or on their table and they share some interesting nugget of wisdom or insight for their industry. And they've got millions of followers. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Well, there you have it. Trust me, if Moses would send you his invoice for your consultation on your Twitter pages or LinkedIn page, I'm sure most of us will not afford, but thank you so much for sharing those insights with us. Please don't go too far because I was taking a few notes for the next questions, but I've decided to pause and wait until you join us after the break. So stay tuned. Hello there, welcome back to the Headhunter with me, Laban, of course, having the tech in the house. That's another Moses Kemibaro, just talking to us about the landscape. And now I just want to shift gears and just talk about what's happening in the landscape of technology. Number one, we spoke about Safaricom going into 5G. We've seen Safaricom going into Ethiopia as well. The other day I saw we've had Microsoft launching a research hub. You can tell us a bit more
Innovation
about that.
Hub, yes.
Innovation Hub. At the same time, there was, I don't know who was the latest entrant after Microsoft, and they became like a sort of there's a jostle for talent, because of all these tech companies setting up shop. Then, you find like local companies are losing a lot of their key talents to these multinationals. So there's a lot of movement. Then you're told, okay, upwards of $5,000 for you to get a software developer. You need upwards of $5,000. I don't know how true that is.
Things are skewed that way now. Yes, yes.
So what exactly is happening? And then let's just kind of paint a picture of where we were before and what's happening now.
Yeah, I think the great shift or the paradigm shift happened with COVID. All right, let's just start there. That's the most basic thing. Pre-COVID, we got into our cars, we went to meetings, we commuted to work every day. There's a certain work style that became prevalent across the industry, and it's been that way for probably 15 years. Okay, game changes in the sense that the moment we had to transition from a work at office to work from home, consumer behavior irrevocably changed, and not just in the work sense, but even in terms of our daily diet of content. We stopped watching TV as much, we stopped reading newspapers because of safety issues. We became very digitally first as consumers and people at large. And what has happened is that, in that sense, is that everything now has, I like to use the word Uberified. Everything has been Uberified. Everything is on demand. Everything is real time. People expect things to happen in seconds and not minutes. We're shopping for groceries online. We meet people for the first time after 2 years after working with them. This is now our norm, what we call the new digital normal. As a result of that, I think everything has changed, including this acceleration around not just in terms of how we consume things digitally, but also how we do things. Okay, the digital transformation. And when I look at it from that point of view, and I think looking at the landscape broadly, obviously HR practices have been changed a lot. International entrants have come into the market looking to tap into African excellence around software development and technology innovation. We have seen pay grades have changed. One of the things I'm noticing when I look at my LinkedIn is a lot of people that I've been working with in the various organizations. It's not even about talent just being hired locally by these companies, but are literally getting on planes and moving to Dublin, moving to places like where Meta has regional offices. This is a global talent transition happening. And a lot of it is about funneling people into these organizations who are able to allow them to remain globally competitive from wherever they are. It's not just about Kenya anymore. It's about the best talent globally. So I think even the mindsets of many of these organizations have changed because they're saying, we will find the best people wherever they exist on this planet and bring them into our organization. And to attract such people, whether they're going to be domiciled in their regional headquarters in Ireland or in Nairobi where they've created a hub, we must pay them globally competitive pay grades. Other trends we're seeing is that you've probably seen in the market companies like Zoho, Odo, who provide ERP solutions for small and medium-sized enterprises. So with this digital transformation, we are seeing new entrants into the market who are not targeting the biggest companies, but more mid-tier and smaller businesses who want to essentially transform their business processes using some of these platforms. So again, how our organizations are allowed becoming more competitive by making sure they're following the best practices of having these tools and platforms in place.
Okay.
So that sort of feels, and then another thing I want to just say is that we also saw this transition towards e-commerce. Yeah, the modern business today in Kenya, more often than not, if they're selling products for consumers, has some kind of e-commerce capability. Either through platforms like Jumia or Glovo, or B, through their own direct consumer platform. That's a trend we waited for 20 years to happen.
Mention Instagram here, because I think Jumia and Glovo, they're really scared of what Instagram, and I'll just speak loosely about, family man like my sister, for instance, will see a pair of, nice shoes on Instagram, pay for it, through this M-Pesa platform, get it on a boda, take it to your house. So I think I saw some analytics, and maybe the numbers are not out in terms of like, wow, is Instagram then the new e-commerce platform as well? So it's not only just sharing pictures, but people actually buying.
Oh yes, and that's been the case even pre-COVID, but I think what happened is it accelerated, it increased. It probably grew maybe 5-fold during this last 2-3 years. So again, the consumer behavior is driven around such platforms. We also know that there's WhatsApp for Business, where people are building like online shops, and you can order and pay with M-Pesa.
So it's possible to learn the skills. Do I go online?
Oh yeah,
or do
absolutely.
I maybe check out, a short course, for instance, somewhere?
Absolutely. There's so many beautiful platforms that let you do this. In fact, even within the Google framework and so forth, you'll find that there are free courses available there. You have platforms like Udemy that allow you to learn all this stuff. Coursera, locally.
And then we've seen some schools, tech schools, also just coming in.
Even in the local market. Moringa is in the market.
The room is doing
up.
a good job as well in terms of just trying to put all these developers.
Absolutely.
I think what we've even seen from the questions and the feedback we're receiving from the show is really how now did you just get ahead. So the fact that it's clear. I mean, there's the war for talent, particularly in tech. Some jobs are becoming irrelevant. Then how do you get ahead to bid on that tipping point of sorts? So let's talk about the other aspect that's quite critical, which is more on the regulation, and really something that you guys in the industry, I don't know if it technology, the regulation is behind technology, and how do you see that support or the ecosystem? Because yes, there are the tech companies, there are the investors who are coming in as well, but have you got the good support as well from government circles, from regulators, and what have you?
Yes, in fact, very recently there had been a situation where they wanted to create an ICT practitioner's, I suppose, a license or a certification, as it were. And without that, you would not be able to do many of the things that we do today in our line of work. But I remember at the time the CS was no longer there, Musheru said that, this thing that they were trying to pass through Parliament was shut down, because in order to create a good and vibrant ecosystem around, let's say, technology, you need to not create too many boundaries to access or too many barriers to entry so that people can actually become operational in that space. If you're going to create certifications and things that, on one hand, serve to create some sort of minimum standard as an industry, but also could act as an impediment in what is essentially a very early stage industry for this country, then you would basically limit a lot of young people from finding careers in that space. And a lot of people that we work with, including many of our employees, as much as many of them have gone through, let's say, tertiary education, a majority of the skill sets that they're using in their day job were actually self-taught. People went online, they even watched YouTube videos, they did practical experiences with clients. A lot of this stuff is self-taught. It may not be certified in the sense that we would see it within a law or a regulation, but they are more than capable of doing so. We have people who've come to us who, while they were at JQAT or Kenyatta University, were already building small businesses and consulting for clients. They don't have those certifications, but they're doing the work. So I think Kenya has been very good in terms of becoming this Silicon Savannah, where by sort of having a light touch on regulation in some of these areas, we've actually created a very interesting ecosystem that is now so big and so interesting that it's brought in the likes of Microsoft and Google to even open up development hubs locally. But also within the SME tiers, we now have a mushrooming ecosystem of small businesses that are serving people from a technology services perspective.
What has that done to ethics in technology? I mean, hackings, you're seeing fraud. Of course, there's the bit about trying to go electronic across. But at the same time, the other back end is now you're getting more people who are becoming smarter with the system and just trying to see how to take advantage of it.
Yeah, like I mentioned, the other day we had this cybersecurity conference with Communications Authority, and this topic came up very, very much so that, with all these, technology forward systems and situations that we're in today, there are also the downsides. There's a lot of cyber threats. We are seeing instances of a lot of banks and other types of organizations that deal in financial services. We've heard about some of the instances where people's M-Pesa accounts are being, cleaned out, and their bank accounts are getting cleaned out because of these issues. And I think if nothing else, we find a situation where people at an individual level need to start thinking very, very carefully around their own cybersecurity. At an individual level, organizations need to start building the right protocols and also the right systems to protect themselves. In fact, they say over 90% of the time, many cyber threats are really your own internal actors, people within the organization who create those loopholes. So ethics for sure becomes a big factor because, when a lot of young people are looking for the quick buck, it can become a problem.
Moses, goodness, funny how time moves very fast as well when you're having this conversation. We started off very well looking at the whole opportunity about, technology, particularly from an internal perspective, both from an employee-employer side. The space moved on to the space here in Kenya and in the region. A lot of exciting times, particularly in the people and tech. I just want to give you the last few minutes just to encapsulate all that for us. You're in that space over 2 decades of experience as well. What would you advise, both now the employee, you're looking at the employer, and just the whole ecosystem? Just some of your quick tidbits for the industry at large.
I think for me, maybe the word that comes to mind is possibly flexibility, right? We have gone through an unprecedented period globally, because of the pandemic and how that's affected work, the nature of work, the future of work. We are seeing a situation where, if anything, the power has shifted from the employer to the potential employee or the contractor, right? In fact, in America, they're struggling to find people to work in organizations. I think they're calling it the Great Resignation, and people are not going back to work. So when all these transitions are happening at such a dramatic and significant level, I think the employer and people looking to hire talent either on a full-time or part-time basis, you need to learn flexibility. You need to start adapting your processes, adapting your business to be more compatible with what the modern workforce looks like.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that and you're not sort of adapting your organization to accommodate this new reality, you potentially are going to lose out in terms of not just attracting the right people, but even retaining them. All right. Another thing I want to point out is that when we talk about the future of work, jobs are going to disappear. All right. People need to start retooling, reskilling, and starting to see themselves in entirely new ways in terms of how they bring value to the process. I always like to say that, never let a human do a job that a robot can do. Meaning that if there's a manual job that is clearly going to be automated through technology, we're even seeing it in banks in Kenya, apps and all that. There are whole back offices that no longer exist because the loan approval process uses machine learning and artificial intelligence. So those people can now be redeployed
to something
to
else.
maybe customer service where it has to be high touch.
Yeah.
So when you start thinking about your current role and your job, start to think about the future. In the next 5 to 10 years, does that job still exist? And number 2, what are you going to do now to remain relevant in the next 5 to 10 years? Yesterday I was meeting somebody where we're talking about writing. There's a website you can go to called copy.ai. You put in a topic and it automatically writes a blog post for you. So we're reaching a place where technology is so impactful on the nature of work going forward that you need to start thinking about, within that ecosystem, where are you and where do you need to be in the next 2 to 5 to 10 years so that you can remain relevant and employed or engage in some form of work, because maybe the software, maybe the robot is coming for your job.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks, Moses. I've been scribbling all across, just making sure I don't miss it on this, miss out on any insights you give. And actually, speaking about myself, I know I'm a laggard when it comes into technology. Well, I'm trying to really get ahead. Moving on from the notebook into the iPad. I don't know if you've struggled with that as well.
It's a struggle. I mean, I come from the people who knew the world before the internet, as you know. So I still have my affinities to certain things traditional. Like when I write, I feel like that memory or that thing is better retained than when I type it.
Yes.
I thought I could never get off newspapers. That was
Yes.
2 years ago,
Okay.
pre-pandemic. I no
That's pretty
longer-
exciting for us, a standard group. Then that means you still
but I
buy the
consume
papers.
digitally.
Okay, all right.
So
okay.
I don't buy the newspaper, but I read online.
Yeah.
So it's always a challenge. You know, there are things that we definitely have nostalgia for.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, the world is moving into new places, and we need to be, always learning, always being willing to be flexible to remain relevant.
True. Moses, thank you so much. This has been enriching.
Likewise,
Really
such a pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Karibu tena. That has been Moses Kemibaro, who's just been speaking to us about the whole technological evolution right here in Kenya and in the region, and particularly to you as an employee or as a headhunter. How do you make sure that you can actually use technology to get ahead and be headhunted? My name is Laban. Always a pleasure to have you on board. See you again next time.